From Toronto studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Saamiyah Syed. Our top story tonight. The State Department is blaming the administrations of former President Donald Trump and President Joe Biden for the chaotic U.S. troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. A report released Friday says the decision by both presidents to end the U.S. military mission in August 2021 had serious consequences for the Afghan government and security. The Afghanistan After Action Review says insufficient thought had been given at the highest levels to worst-case scenarios. The report says due to the challenge of ensuring the security of the large diplomatic mission in a conflict zone, the plan was to retain some U.S. forces. However, the details were not clearly defined. The review team conducted more than 150 interviews with current and former State Department officials. The U.S. presence in Afghanistan began in October 2001. It ended after 20 years with the withdrawal of American troops in 2021. That led to the collapse of the Afghan government and chaos at Kabul's airport in the country's capital. A Senate investigation has found U.S. government agencies failed to respond to an intelligence warning of an attack on the Capitol on January 6, 2021. A report released last week found that the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI dismissed or downplayed the threats. The report also found that the agencies did not communicate effectively with each other, resulting in a lack of coordination. According to the report, this failure was similar to what happened in the run-up to the September 11, 2001 terror attacks. Some lawmakers believe this report again shows a larger problem within the U.S. intelligence community. They say agencies need to do a better job of gathering and sharing intelligence and being more proactive in preventing future attacks. President Joe Biden is calling the Supreme Court ruling overturning the student loan waiver a mistake and a misinterpretation of the Constitution. The Supreme Court rejected the student loan debt forgiveness plan by a 6-3 vote. If passed, it would have forgiven up to $20,000 of student loan debt for more than 43 million Americans. Biden has pledged to continue helping those at the bottom of the economic scale. He is also criticizing Republican lawmakers who oppose student debt relief, saying they received hundreds of thousands of dollars in relief themselves. He points out that said Republicans are pushing a bill to provide hundreds of billions of dollars in tax relief for wealthy Americans. The Council on American-Islamic Relations is calling on law enforcement officials to investigate 2 possible bias incidents targeting a mosque in New Mexico. Vandals broke into a mosque in Portales last week. They reportedly tore out copies of the Quran, poked holes in the walls, destroyed furniture, left trash, and placed a framed image of Jesus Christ on a pile of rubble. There were 2 such acts of vandalism, one on June 23rd and another on June 27th. Police have not classified the case as a hate crime. CAIR condemned the attacks and called on local police to increase patrols. It is also urging the local Muslim community and Islamic institutions to take additional security precautions. Last year, a CAIR report documented more than 6,000 cases of discrimination and hatred against Muslims nationwide. A study published in the journal Earth System Science Data warns the oceans are warming faster than previously thought. Researchers say ocean surfaces temperatures are rising up to 5 degrees Celsius above normal in some places. This is causing chaotic weather patterns, including torrential rains and severe heat waves and droughts. Scientists say the government must work to reduce man-made greenhouse gas emissions, which they say are the cause of the warming. They are also urging a shift to renewable energy sources. Scientists warn unless mitigation measures are taken, warming will continue and weather patterns will become more extreme. Abstract artist Sumrian Ali has depicted migration and the hard life of an immigrant through her work. Her first exhibition, entitled My Father's Journey, was recently held at the Canal Gallery in Alexandria, Virginia. Using her late father, Syed Summers Ali's story, she expresses pain and hope with her paintings. Ali's father migrated from India to Pakistan as a child after the two countries' independence from British rule in 1947. He too loved painting. Ali has turned to abstract art to carry on his legacy. Tracing his journey from India to Karachi, Pakistan, and then to Toronto, Canada, followed by New York, she uses her art to trace and share his life. Ali is an architect and designer, sketching structures by day and painting by night. She says she draws inspiration from famous artists such as Georgia O'Keeffe, Jackson Pollock, and Mark Rothko. More on the new border controls introduced in Sweden after multiple Quran burning incidents comes with details after the break, so stay tuned and we'll be right back. Welcome back. The Swedish government wants to prevent people from entering the country to commit crimes. The Swedish Foreign Ministry says its government reintroduced border controls in May. The move comes on the heels of the burning of the Quran in the capital Stockholm last week. An Iraqi immigrant with ties to Shia militias desecrated the holy book on the eve of the Muslim festival of Eid al-Adha. The Ministry of Justice says freedom of expression enjoys strong protection in Sweden, but adds that the government does not support every opinion expressed. It acknowledges that hateful actions have serious consequences for Sweden's internal security. It says in both cases, the perpetrators came from outside. In January, Rasmus Paludan, who is from Denmark, burned a copy of the Quran outside a mosque and the Turkish embassy in Stockholm. Law enforcement has arrested over 700 people in France amid violent protests sparked by a French police officer's murder of a teenager. Nationwide protests over the killing of Nahil, a 17-year-old of Algerian descent, continue to shake France. Nahil was shot at point-blank range by an officer Tuesday in the Paris suburb of Nanterre. The officer faces a formal investigation for voluntary homicide and has been placed in preliminary detention. Protesters set on fire more than 800 public buildings and over 500 vehicles on the fifth night of protests on Sunday. Some 45,000 police personnel and thousands of firefighters have been mobilized to contain rioting. Israel has killed at least 9 Palestinians and injured at least 50 today in an escalation of violence in the West Bank city of Jenin. The attack was part of a major Israeli aerial and ground offensive into the city. Thousands of Israeli soldiers with armored bulldozers and snipers on rooftops entered the city and its refugee camp. It is Israel's largest military operation in the West Bank in 2 decades. The White House says it defends Israel's right to security and is monitoring the situation closely. Israel has repeatedly targeted Jenin's refugee camp over the past 2 years in an attempt to break the resistance of Palestinians resisting Israeli occupation. Experts are saying that people who incite hatred against Muslims in Belgium are hardly punished due to a legal loophole. Patrick Charlier is director of the Interfederal Center for Equal Opportunities. He says a provision in the Belgian constitution prevents hate speech against races. But no such provision exists when it comes to hate speech against a religious identity. Charlier says this legal loophole needs to be corrected. A 2/3 majority is needed to amend the constitution. Many incidents of Muslims and veiled women being victims of discrimination based on religion have been reported, but the perpetrators have not been punished. Charlier notes Belgian society is quickly accepting religious diversity. He says companies and schools are turning to his organization for suggestions on embracing diversity and inclusive policies. Just last week, during Eid al-Adha, many Palestinians in Jenin were unable to celebrate the holiday as they were under attack by Israeli forces. We have a special report on this topic. Let's watch.
This is the story of a Muslim Network TV employee who called Palestine to wish his family Eid Mubarak.
Assalamu alaikum. Eid Mubarak. That is what I said when my nephew picked up the phone as I called home to Jenin, occupied Palestine. My nephew's response? What Eid? He continued, since morning, the Israeli army has been surrounding the town with large military vehicles. Soldiers with heavy weapons patrol. Snipers have been positioned on the rooftops, and multiple helicopters hover above the town. People are scared. We can't go visiting to even wish our neighbors or other family members a happy Eid. My sisters wanted to come and say Eid Mubarak to their mother, but can't because of the situation. My nephew continued. A few days ago, my wife and children were sitting in the living room of our home. They heard something strike the window of my daughter's bedroom. When we inspected to find out what happened, we were surprised to see that a sniper bullet had shot through the glass window, tore the curtain, and embedded itself in the cement wall across from the window. Here's an image of the bullet. What if one of my daughters had been in the room, he said. What if this bullet had struck her? Alhamdulillah, they're safe. But other Palestinian children are not that lucky. Israelis have killed 27 Palestinian children this year alone. Kids are arrested regularly. It is not just the Israeli army who have weapons. Israeli settlers are also armed to the teeth and regularly instigate attacks themselves. On June 21st, hundreds of Israeli soldiers invaded the occupied Palestinian village of Turmes. Just hours before a wedding, they burned down the wedding hall. They also torched at least 30 homes and 60 cars in broad daylight. So whether it is Eid or a wedding, Palestinians are often forced to mourn instead of celebrate. I hung up the phone and reflected deeply. I asked myself, why aren't stories like my nephew's part of mainstream media reports? Why don't the Palestinian people have anyone to advocate for them? Why don't the children have the same opportunities as other children around the world? I pray for an Eid when Palestinian children can run around freely, celebrating without a fear of an Israeli sniper or a military helicopter above their head.
A United Nations report has found serious violations against children increased in 2022 compared to previous years. The Secretary General's annual report on children in armed conflict released last week documents over 27,000 verified grave violations. These include the killing, maiming, and abduction of children and their recruitment into armed groups. The report says most grave violations were committed in Ukraine, Syria, Palestine, Israel, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Afghanistan, Somalia, and Yemen. Over 1,000 children were victims of sexual violence and more than 3,000 were abducted. Virginia Gamba is UN Special Representative for Children in Armed Conflict. She says the report paints a deeply disturbing picture of the suffering of children in conflict. She called on all parties to conflict and respect international law and protect children. The report also recommends improving compliance with international law, increasing monitoring and reporting, and providing support to children affected by conflict. Dutch police officers have been barred from wearing religious clothing or symbols while on duty. This includes the hijab, Christian crosses, and Jewish kippahs. The decision follows calls by right-wing groups for police uniforms to be neutral. Dutch Justice Minister Dylan Yashilgoes says the regulation brings clarity on the neutrality of the uniform. He stresses that visible expressions of religion or belief are not appropriate for officers in uniform. In 2017, Amsterdam Police Commissioner advocated lifting the restrictions to promote multiculturalism. As an example, he cited the United Kingdom, where female officers can wear the hijab while on duty. Sara Izzat, a former Rotterdam police officer, campaigned for the right to wear a hijab with her uniform. Critics of the Dutch dress code include Johan van Renswood, a police commissioner responsible for combating racism, and the Dutch Commission for Human Rights. Several multinational corporations are facing scrutiny for their alleged role in Uyghur forced labor. 3 groups have filed a complaint with German authorities alleging Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz, and BMW failed to eliminate forced labor from the production of their automobiles in China. Many human rights groups have documented Uyghurs, natives of China's northwest region, being detained in camps and forced to work in factories in dreadful conditions. The U.S. House Select Committee on China released a report saying Temu, a China-based online retailer, failed to maintain a meaningful compliance program to combat forced labor. China has faced severe international criticism for its egregious rights violations against the Uyghur minorities. Western governments are taking action against companies implicated in Uyghur forced labor, supported by recent legislation aimed at halting such practices. Companies accused of such practices have defended their operations, claiming they strictly uphold human rights standards in their supply chains. Before we end today's news segment, I would like to extend a special request. It takes more than 55 hours of work per day to produce this news segment for you. It is news with a unique perspective, and you can find it only on here, on Muslim Network TV. Sound Vision is a not-for-profit organization which produces it, and just like PBS and NPR, we depend on your donations. Please visit muslimnetwork.tv to donate now, and click the link below to donate. That's all from our Toronto studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.